Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of the New Orleans Humanist Perspective. My name is Charlotte Clausen, President of the Board of Directors for the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, which is the sponsor of this program, and I will be the host for your show today. First, I'd like to introduce our guests and tell you a little bit more about them. We have Michael Pearson, who was born and raised in Minnesota, and all of his grandparents came from Scandinavia, 3 from Norway and 1 from Sweden. He had a Scandinavian and Lutheran church and college upbringing, including graduating from a Swedish Lutheran college, Gustavus Adolphus College in Minnesota. He has graduate degrees from the University of Colorado in Boulder and spent 23 years as a professor of marketing at Bowling Green University in Ohio, and then spent 20 years as a professor of business and marketing at Loyola University here in New Orleans. And he has been retired for 3 years, but still is associated with Loyola as an emeritus professor. And next we have Trine Sollesnes Tobar, who was born and raised in Stavanger, Norway. And she moved to the U.S. in 1999 after marrying her husband, a United States Marine of 27 years, who is still on active duty. She has 3 daughters. She moved to New Orleans in June of 2016 and started volunteering at the then named Norwegian Seamen's Church. And she started to work as a manager for the Scandia House Scandinavian Jazz Church when they took over the premises in February 1st of 2017. Her official title is Executive Director of the Scandia House. So welcome both you and both of you to our program today. And I know we have some really interesting things to cover about the Scandia House and the Scandinavian Jazz Church, excuse me. First, I think we decided that we would start with Mike to talk about his heritage and how he became involved with the church.
Okay, well, when my wife and I moved to New Orleans in '94, we bought a house in the near area of the church, okay. And I always still call it the Norwegian Seamen's Church, even though I can't. So if I say the church, that's okay. But I drive by the Norwegian Seamen's Church and see the anchor in front and say that's an interesting place. And I talked to my mother on the phone, some back in Minnesota. I said, "Oh yeah, they're all around the place." But we started going to the church some for. Because of the jazz services and the music, and we'd go to the Christmas sale. But we weren't really very good members. We were just kind of casual members. A lot of the services were in Norwegian, which was hard, being I don't speak Norwegian. Okay. But still, we would go some. So it was a very interesting place. And
so you just kind of discovered it in the past few years, I guess.
Well, no, it was, we've been here 20 years.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's been a long time.
Yeah, so it's been a while.
Okay.
So bit by bit we would go over there. Like, I've always been told that back in Norway, the 98% of the people are Lutheran, and they go to church twice a year.
Okay.
And maybe
okay.
I'd go a little bit more often than that, just because of the music.
Right,
All
right. That makes sense. And well, and I guess you and I were introduced because I was at the festival, and you were there presenting about your book, and you were, dressed up as a Viking. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the books?
Dressed up in a weird costume. Well, my mother was really into genealogy, and both her parents, all my grandparents, were from Scandinavian countries. And she started doing genealogy, and she wrote a book in full genealogy of all the branches of the family back in '89, and was really got into a lot of things. It's my Bible now when I see, okay, Grandpa Olaf, when was he born? You
Yes.
can look up all this stuff on it. But my mother, after she did this, she'd go around to all kinds of fairs in Minnesota and selling her book and giving talks, and she'd go to colleges, the small Lutheran colleges there, and she'd give lectures. And a lot of the colleges would be interested in this and her later book too. But after she wrote this book, she started traveling to Norway a little bit more to meet some of the relatives and she found out we were related to the Bishop of Norway, who's a very important person in Norway. And the Bishop of Norway had traced his genealogy back to Harold the Fair-haired, King Harold the Fair-haired, in about the 800, 900 AD. And because we were related to the bishop, now I can say that I'm related to King Harold the Fair-haired way back there, which ignores all the horse thieves and things. My mother started getting interested in who all these kings were. And when she was doing research on the kings, I remember she called me and she said, all I can find out is about their battles and the wars. And she said, people don't want to hear about that. They want to hear about what their wives and kids were like and what they did. And I told her at the time it would probably be a chick's book on the Vikings. But anyway, when I proofread it, I kind of found out there was a lot about brothers killing brothers to keep the throne and that type of thing. But she ended up with they do not wear horns.
Okay.
Which my costume had big horns,
Right.
but the Vikings did not wear horns. That was kind of a Hollywood type of thing.
And there we have your picture showing everyone your outfit.
Big horns.
Yes, yes, very big horns. Okay.
But she started tracing back all the kings, and when she wrote the book, she'd find out things about the kings, but she's putting the emphasis more on kind of the social thing. And when she found things about the kings, about what they looked like, she'd have a caricature drawn of the king. And like in here, Harold the Fair-haired was supposed to have blonde hair below his waist, and King Olaf was really fat and didn't want to leave the throne too much, and and she was Queen Ada when she'd give her talks, and they've got caricatures of all of those. If she didn't find any description, she wouldn't have it. But it's kind of interesting because it's kind of a little piece of each one of these kings as you're going through history. And a lot of the professors where she gave talks in the class ended up using this book as a reference book because it kept a nice chronological order, and she had a chart that went along with it too.
And we were able to put that up for everyone. So.
And they had, in fact, I was listening to public radio on Saturday afternoon. They have that show, or Saturday morning. They have that kind of humorous quiz show. And I was driving, and the multiple choice was, where did the name Bluetooth come from?
Okay.
And the answer was that it was named after a Swedish king, Harold
Okay.
the Bluetooth.
Okay.
I think it was Harold the Bluetooth.
Okay, now
And I came back home and looked in the book, and can I find Harold the Bluetooth in here? And I have 3 or 4 pages of what Harold was like and who was before him and who was after him. So it was a really interesting type of way to be able to use the book.
Right.
But my mother died about 4 years ago, and she left my brothers and me with about 10 cases of the book,
Okay.
which we can't throw away because we'd be haunted for the rest of our lives. So one of the ways over the past years is when the Norwegian Seamen's Church had their Christmas sale, that I would dress up as a Viking and sell my mother's book, and all the money would go to the church, because it's really a matter of just, hey, how do I get these books to people who might read them,
Right.
and so they don't just throw them away somewhere. But that's what I do. I dress up as a Viking and talk to people, and in doing that, I've become more and more involved in the church.
Right, as a community member,
Yes.
making a contribution.
And
Yeah.
especially now that there's been some transfer from the Norwegian Seamen's Church into the Scandia
right.
Center.
Okay.
I'm trying to get more involved, going to church more than twice a year,
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get more involved and trying to help the church over this transition period.
Okay. Well, I know that since you mentioned the festival, that is one of the things that has endured in the New Orleans area. As far as that was one of the reasons I knew about it. Is my husband is Swedish, and so this was always something kind of fun for us to attend. And we buy some of things at the grocery, and so that might be an opportunity for you to kind of talk about the like maybe starting with the history, and then we could work up to the festival in current times. But why don't you tell us a little bit, how did the church end up in New Orleans and that kind of history?
Well, the Norwegian Seamen's Church ended up there due to shipping. Norway was, I have to say, a shipping country with the long coast that we have and everything. There was built a lot of ships. We had a lot of seamen, and they were traveling the world. And actually, back in 1860 something, there was a pastor called Johan Storjohan, and he ended up in Leith in Scotland, and he saw the need of a pastor for the Norwegian seamen that were over there. So he went back to Norway and gathered some people in Bergen, Norway, and said that we need to do something about that. The Norwegian seamen around the world, they need somebody, and they need somebody there because their home churches back in Norway couldn't help them.
Right.
So in 1864 in Bergen, Norway, the Norwegian Seamen's Church was started. Created, yes. And in 1906, they started here in New Orleans, down on Britannia Street. And they were in an old mansion and up until 1968, where they had the new facilities built as they stand today.
Okay. So I guess that's the thing that's interesting, is I used to always wonder, driving in the uptown area, why it was called that, because I guess for some reason, I don't know, that I just wouldn't put it all in my head, but then of course it makes sense that it would be that ports, and this would be the ports that you would have seamen who would have a community, and this would be a great way for them to have a church, have a place to go, and to meet other people in the same circumstances. And so then of course that makes total sense, but it's funny how we don't put all that together.
At the last festival, somebody was telling me, some old timer at the church was telling me that back at the time they'd have 4 buses that went over and picked up the seamen at the church and drove them back to the church, and they fed them, and they had the magazines to read. And
up to 200 people a day in the 70s was quite normal.
Oh, wow.
And we had the reading room, which we had newspapers from all over Norway, so they could find their home newspaper.
Yeah.
So what the Norwegian Siemens Church mission is they want to create a home away from home. That's
Okay.
their motto.
Right.
A home away from home.
Okay.
And that goes for the Siemens, but it also goes for expat families now with the oil business that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And it goes for students abroad, which I also cover.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's any kind of crisis in your life when you're not at home, they cover that as well.
Right. Okay.
So-
Okay. Well, I knew that some of the, like having the store and having the kind of like a hotel set up for, is it, and you may want to talk about that in more detail, but is that only for Scandinavian travelers, or?
It's not really. It's for whoever wants to come and visit us. And whoever wants to stay with us, they just have to make reservations, call us, or
So kind of
email
like
us.
like a hotel.
It's
that
kind
they-
it's kind of like that. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Because it
So-
has all of the swimming pool.
Yeah, it
and
has the swimming pool and a nice yard. And
Yeah.
it's nice and tranquility in the
Okay.
back there. So
Okay.
has the store with different kinds of Scandinavian food,
Right.
chocolates and meats and herring, not to mention.
Right, and
So-
caviar.
Caviar, yes.
Different caviar.
Yes,
That's
and
something
cheese
I
and stuff like that.
Lutefisk.
Lutefisk, not to mention, and lefse.
Sorry.
You have to have it in there.
Well, since it started many years ago, but then now we've come kind of to a transition period, and if you would like to cover kind of the recent transition
Well,
from.
the reason is there's not as many Norwegian Siemens anymore that travels from harbor to harbor. They port to port. They the main Siemens that are now their officers, and there's very few on one ship.
Yeah.
We have become more of a oil industry country. So. It's closer to land. We do have offshore drilling and so on, which we also have pastors that covers that. But it's not as many people traveling anymore with the ships. So and we don't have as many expat families either anymore that used to be here.
Okay.
So there's not as the foundation of the Norwegian community is not here as it used to be.
Did Hurricane Katrina have any major impact on that?
I am not so sure if that had a lot of major impact on it, but because it was going down a little bit before that happened as well.
I see. So it was kind of just dwindling a little bit, and then Hurricane Katrina
yes,
kind
and
of.
the people the Norwegians that stayed here are getting older. So the community is also getting older, so there's not as many young families coming in as it used to be in the 70s and 80s.
Okay.
So it's more people that have stayed since then.
Okay.
So now we're kind of wanting to, the new Scandia house and the Scandinavian Jazz Church, what we're looking for now is the Scandinavian countries as well as whoever wants to join us and come to see us for our music, our culture events, and so on.
So maybe being more open to the local community of people who are interested.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Originally, I'm really not part of their mission. That it's Norwegian citizens living away in Norwegian seamen out, and somebody who's just got Norwegian heritage was really not part of their mission. And I see much more now with the Scandinavian, the Scandia house, that it might become more open to me.
Yeah.
Having an event for people who enjoy their heritage. And like I went to the festival, the German Fest, and they've got a lot of people with German background. Well, there's a lot of people with Scandinavian background too, and like to be able to see a lot more involvement with anybody with a name like Pearson or Clausen.
Clausen,
or,
yes,
yes. That would get more involved with the center.
Right, and certainly growth within a community. I mean, ultimately, that is what the survival of an organization is, and certainly something that has the footprint that you have. You know, having a building, being able to offer a place to stay, which I mean certainly is an asset. And I didn't know if you wanted to kind of talk about some of the things that, or if there are any other things beyond like the festival. What other events that you?
Well, we have the guest houses, like you mentioned briefly, that people can come and stay with us at the church. We have we're looking to get a wedding venue going.
Okay.
Because we have the perfect facilities for it. We even have a pastor that can do it. So we are looking to have more cultural events. We have luncheons with different topics. We have last week we just had a Swedish group come in and play.
Yes.
Which was amazing. They were actually down at CAC and had their performance with Sidra, the ballet. And we will have other concerts and so on coming up.
Okay.
And we also celebrate Lucia, Sancta Lucia, which is
that would be another festival.
Yes.
Kind of. I mean.
Yes.
Yeah. So okay, so that seems like, I mean, in terms of, I think that's an interesting part of it, like you were saying, opening it up to more people and you kind of represent somebody kind of new. I mean, the fact that you felt like it wasn't...
target somebody younger than me.
Right. But I thought that was an interesting part of it, that, you know, you feel like that you are a new... contributor or community member, and yet, you know, you're retired and kind of have your own thing. And obviously, I assume the church and the center would welcome other people who may have similar historical backgrounds. I don't know.
And we do. We have people from different backgrounds. A lot of people moving down from the north.
Oh,
you know, from the Minnesotas and Dakotas. There's a lot of Norwegian or Scandinavian heritage up there. Because it was similar farming cultures there from Norway and Sweden and Denmark, with the environment. But they're smart. They go into warmer weather now, so they're coming down here.
Right. So being down here, definitely that would. And see, that is to make it into a community. I think that I know that I definitely saw that. In fact, I think there was a time that I would miss the festival just because of I just didn't realize it was coming, and then I would miss it, and I would think, oh, now I have to wait another year, because it felt like something that I kind of thought was really just culturally unique just to New Orleans, being that we have all this different type of New Orleans culture, but this was something very unusual and different.
Yes,
being able to come together and have the foods and the different, I know just being familiar with Sweden and Christmas ornaments and things like that, you know, just being able to go and see that. And I thought, here it is in the middle of, you know, kind of the tropical South and the New Orleans thing, and it just kind of stands out. So it was, I know as just a community member myself, just of New Orleans, I'm sure it means something. I've even had some people from our organization who would say, oh, well, you know, be sure to tell me when it's happening, because I like to go too. I mean, the food is always what kind of intrigues me, is the open sandwiches and the cakes and things like that you just don't get anywhere else in New Orleans, of course. So that was always unique to me. And I didn't know if y'all have like is it a set organization of people who do the
it's help from
festival?
Volunteers, you know. So it's purely volunteering,
making food and everything,
and making the festival
and items to sell and
so
things.
we have the Women's Auxiliary, which have the little Christmas ornaments and so on. We have volunteers that will work in the kitchen to make the open-faced sandwiches. We work long hours for our cakes.
Oh, yes.
But they taste good, so it's all worth it.
They do, yes. The marzipan, I believe, is that that's kind of a staple of Scandinavian?
That's kind of our birthday cake, actually.
Oh,
so that's
okay.
the ultimate birthday cake.
Is a marzipan
So,
cake.
Marzipan cake.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Is that the one with the circles?
That's the one that has like the fondant on top of it.
Oh, okay.
Marzipan,
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
What is the one that has the?
Oh, that's kransekage. That is a towering cake. It's a cookie cake, and we use that for weddings and
okay.
baptism, confirmations, Christmas.
Right.
17th of May when we celebrate our Independence Day.
Oh, okay.
So that's also a huge celebration cake, and it takes forever to make it. So it's
you're only
time-consuming, yes.
using it for a certain
Yes.
time of the year. Okay. Well, I guess as we're getting kind of close to the end of our show, is there anything about the history that you would like to kind of leave people with as far as understanding what the church means to New Orleans?
I think the culture that we are, with jazz and everything, bringing that back and forth over the sea, I think that's something people should come and see what it is all about. So
Yeah. Okay. Because that's true. We didn't really touch on the music, but it seems like with the new jazz church theme, that seems to be something that will be that will be something that will mean a lot to people in New Orleans, because there are so many performers. In fact, some very well-named performers who show up at Jazz Fest and all of that who are Scandinavian.
Yes, both Scandinavian and local.
Right, local
yes,
people.
We have very good names coming to our church,
Yeah.
so we're very, very lucky and very spoiled with that.
There's a very long list of people who have performed at the church, and supporting the musicians is that's important to me, to see that the musicians are supported.
Right. In fact,
when they have this, and it's kind of a matter in a transition time. We kind of look for what kind of programs that we can do and what kind of directions that we can go in. And I'm an old marketing professor, so I get very interested in saying what can we do and how can we do and what new programs and what new target markets, groups of people would enjoy the church.
That's wonderful, and I think it does kind of expand on what a church community can be, because it's so creative, and the music side of it, I think, is just a wonderful element that perhaps a lot of people in New Orleans don't know about, and then the new incarnation to the jazz church and the Scandia House is that step, I think. So I certainly I know that with the event coming up, the Christmas event shortly in a few weeks, am I right? That would be one example of people being introduced to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, well, I know that we're at the end of our program, but I want to thank you for coming, and I certainly hope our audience tunes in again soon. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.